Okay, so we'll get started. Welcome and thanks everybody for joining us tonight for the webinar Beyond Power, Hydropower on the Cayuga Seneca Canal. For tonight we have representatives from Gravity Renewables, the Hydropower Plant, and company that generates power while at the same time controlling outflow from Seneca Lake. Gravity Renewables works to provide recreational access, clean power, and water conveyance, and we're excited to learn tonight more about the process. Tonight, our two representatives from Gravity Renewables and presenters are Celeste Fay. Celeste is the Director of Regulatory Affairs overseeing their fleet of projects and has experience in hydropower related projects, including fish passage, research and development, and hydrologic analysis, among other things. Welcome and thank you, Celeste, for being here. We also have with us tonight Julie Smith-Galvin, who oversees Gravity Renewables external communications and outreach. Julie is the principal of Green Path Strategies, which is a strategic communications firm and has extensive experience with hydropower siting, licensing, and compliance. Welcome, Julie. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. We ask that you please remain muted until then, and please take it from here.
Great. Thank you so much, Caitlin and Jill, and everyone for inviting us. I probably have spoken with many of you in the past in the pre-COVID days. It was a pleasure to come to some of the Seneca Lake Pure Water Association events, though I have to say I am outside of the Boston area, and Celeste will introduce herself in a moment. She's also in Massachusetts. It's nice to be able to be with you without the long drive. So we are pleased to be here today. Gravity Renewables, as you I'm sure know, is the owner and operator of both the Waterloo and the Seneca Falls facilities on the Cayuga Seneca Canal. They are 2 of 15 plants that we own throughout the country, primarily in the Northeast of the United States. Our model is to purchase hydropower, generally older hydropower, and to reinvest in it, which is exactly what we did with these 2 projects. As you know, these projects date back to around 1916, 1917. And so we are thrilled that they are continuing to be able to operate today, not just for power, but to help the local economy. And of course, one of the big things that these projects do is to regulate the water flows for Seneca Lake. So that's really all I'm going to go into. I'm so pleased to have my colleague and friend Celeste Fay here, who is not only an engineer, but is very closely tied with these projects, monitors the water levels, and is an expert in the FERC licensing and rule curves. And all of that goes into what is required to maintain these projects and to operate them in conjunction with Seneca Lake. So I'm going to pass it over to Celeste.
Thanks, Julie, and welcome. Thanks again for everyone attending tonight. Yeah, so my name is Celeste Fay, and I have a background in civil engineering. At Gravity, I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs, and the hydropower located at the Waterloo and Seneca Falls projects is actually just one piece of a fairly complex system. So I think the goal tonight is to kind of look at the different components of the system and do our best to explain how everything works together. I have some slides. I'm going to try to, let's see. I think I need to be allowed to share. Thank you. Okay, there we go. So let's just jump right into it. Let's see. So it is, I think it's important to understand in the bigger picture what we have going on here. So the Cayuga Seneca Canal is a spur that leads to the Erie Canal system, and we have a couple different graphics here. So we can see here the full Erie Canal system going from in some portions east to west and in others west to east and vice versa. So, and then we have the Cayuga Seneca Canal section, which in this graphic on the left is highlighted in purple. We can see this graphic on the right is, it's the same system, but we have some flow arrows showing the direction of how these various canal systems are working together. And so, you know, we're this feeder system, if you will, coming off of the Seneca Cayuga Canal, as well as, it's not actually labeled here, but the Cayuga Lake as well. And so then if we look in elevation, which is this graphic down here on the bottom, we can see, you know, once again, we have the full Erie Canal coming kind of across the state of New York here. And then we have our spur of the Cayuga Seneca Canal down here. So you can see we have our Seneca Lake here, and this might be a good time to point out that when we're talking about elevations throughout the system, the datum that we're using to reference the elevations is really important. To be honest, I don't know what the datum of this particular graphic is. So let's ignore the specific numbers on this one for the moment. But what we're seeing here is the different drops at the lock structures. And the reason that the lock structures are here is to allow you know, vessels, whether it's recreation or commercial, to move throughout these systems and to lift up and down. And where that elevation difference is, there is an opportunity for power generation. And so that's how we get involved in all of this. But really the power generation is secondary to all of the other things going on in the system. These were built for transportation and these walkages. And so we have our first lock here is about 13 feet in elevation. The second lock though, which is a little bit further downstream, this is at the Seneca Falls Dam on Van Cleef Lake. You can see it's actually a double lock. So it's about 25 feet in elevation difference twice. And that picture behind Julie's, in Julie's background there, that's the 50 feet of elevation difference combined that we're seeing. So it's actually the biggest walk on the system. I'm sure most of you have been there, but if you haven't, I would really encourage you to check it out. So the flow system that we're part of and we're talking about today is discharging into the main Erie Canal system. Okay, and so we can see it a little bit clearer here as well. All right, so if we zoom into the Cayuga Seneca system, there's a couple things that I want to point out. So we have Seneca Lake here, and measured a couple different ways. It is the largest Finger Lake, so you know, there's a significant volume and at times flow of water that we're handling. But part of what's going on here hydraulically is that Cayuga Lake is also discharging into Seneca Lake. So Seneca is handling those flows as well. On the north end, up near Geneva, we have a discharge coming across from Seneca Lake to Cayuga Lake. And then in between, in our section of the system between these two lakes, this is where the flow control structures are located. So this is where the actual releases, depending on the conditions, are made. So we're going to just keep zooming into our area of interest here and where kind of the action is happening, if you will. And one thing that is really important to understand is that this section of water body here from the main Seneca Lake area, and I've zoomed in on the right over here. So what appears to be a river coming out of the northeast side of the lake and flowing in the northeasterly direction all the way over here to Waterloo. The dam is over here. all of this, it looks like it's river, but it's actually an extension of the lake. So we do have, from an engineering point of view, the hydraulics can be just, a little bit different in this long, narrow section compared to our big main lake section. But ultimately, it is the dam down here in Waterloo that is creating the water elevation going all the way back to Seneca Lake. And so, this is a controlled structure, if you will. It's not just a natural river system. So we have, I think now we need to think about our flows. So we have water coming into the system from a couple different places. So when it rains, that water is ultimately going to find its way into our surface waters and into Seneca Lake. And then we also have discharges from Cayuga Lake. And so that is the water that's coming into Seneca Lake. Let's think of it as a bowl. Okay, so you have a couple different sources of water that are filling your bowl. And over here on the left, this is actually, this is a USGS, so US Geological Survey map of the drainage basin. So any water that falls in this yellow highlighted area will ultimately make it into Seneca Lake. And so this is called our drainage basin, and it's actually fairly large. It's about 750 square miles. And anything that falls outside of the shaded area is going to go to our adjacent drainage areas and will not come to us. But anything that falls in here is going to make it into Seneca Lake. Now, this kind of arm, the spur back here is going to flow to Cayuga Lake first. And Cayuga Lake also has a regulating structure. It's down here near Dresden. And ultimately there's a controlled release point that they can also release water into Seneca Lake. And so there can be some delay there depending on what's going on. And they have what's called a rule curve. So they're supposed to be maintaining certain elevations within this lake level over here. So sometimes they might be releasing, more or less in addition to the runoff that we're seeing from the land. So that's generally how we have water coming into our system. And so let's take a look at where we're actually, I'm going to flip back for just a second. So now the only way for water to, or the substantial way for water to come out of the system is over here at the end of our lake. Because remember, this spur coming all the way over here into Waterloo is actually a continuation of the lake. This is where the releases out of the system occur. There's a couple other ways that the water can come out, but let's focus in on Waterloo for a second. Okay, so this is an overview of the hydropower, the dam, and the lock system at Waterloo. And what we're highlighting here is the locations at which water can come out of the system. So we have a bypass structure on the left over here, and this is a bypass channel that comes all the way around the project and then back into the main river system. And at this point, we are more of a river system because we're downstream of the dam. We're no longer in the lake system. We also have a couple gate structures here that allow water to go into the power canal, and this is the water that's going to the turbines. Separately, there is the New York State Canal System lockage on the south end over here. And so for physical kind of man-made releases from the system, these are the primary ones. We also have a little fish passage system to make sure that fish can get by our turbines safely. And so that's this little arrow on the north side here around the powerhouse. So in addition to that, we have, a very large lake, right? So depending on the season, there can be evaporation coming off of our lake. There's also municipal water supply. There's a couple other places that the water is being used and going to, but this is the control structure right here. I think maybe it's important to talk for a minute about regulation. So there's a lot of rules and regulations on how we have to operate this system. So for example, this bypass structure right here, there is a minimum flow that we are required to put through that channel to make sure that the habitat is healthy in this channel over here, right? If we didn't put anything, then it's going to dry up, and that's not good for or healthy for the environment that is within this channel. So there are releases that we have to put through that channel. There are overall in the project, depending, it changes by month, but there is a minimum flow that we have to release from the entire project. So throughout the year, it varies, but that's between 50 and 100 CFS averaged over a period of time. So we are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, so that's at the federal level. We're also regulated by New York DEC, so state regulations as well. And the details of this shows up in our permitting, but regardless of what the lake level is at, we have to provide those environmental releases. And so, there are times when, there's definitely, a lot of needs for the resource. And, I think of, summertime, right? When we haven't had precipitation in a long time. So balancing those needs for these resources can get a little tricky sometimes. But none of this is ever done in a vacuum. Anything outside of our regulatory requirement, for example, when there's not enough water to meet every regulatory requirement in our documents, we call our federal and our state regulators every time and talk to them about how we should proceed. So I do think it's important to understand that, again, none of this is done in a vacuum, and it's a very collaborative effort. So, all right, so here we go. It's all a balance, right? And so we're still talking about flow here. At any given time, we have a certain amount of water coming in. So Keuka releases and precipitation. We also have, I should have mentioned it earlier, but the canal system is operating as a lock, right? So every single time there is a boat that goes through the lock system, there is a large volume of water that is released. So we also have water going out of that lock structure. So water out, we got the fish passage, we got the turbines, we have that bypass flow. We also have the canal lockages, the evaporation, mostly in the summer. You're probably all aware that, there is some other fossil fuel-based generation on the lake, and they use cooling water. And then there's also, that municipal water supply as well, that is doing some withdrawals. So as you can imagine, when water in equals water out, you're in a nice harmony. But to move forward here, here's a cross section through our lake. This right here is Seneca Lake, and if we come over here, when everything is in a nice harmony, we're right where we need to be for the lake level. And we'll talk about lake level in a second here. But when you have more coming in than you are able to take out, you're going to see a rise in the water level. And this is usually, this is when we get heavy precipitation. Usually we see that precipitation sometimes in the late fall, the spring. When we have more water going out of the system than coming in, now, we have a reduced lake level. And so we see our water level coming down. There are also some physical restrictions. There's only so much flow that the turbines can put out. So last year was a high precipitation year. The lake level was high for a good portion of the year, and there is a maximum amount of water that we can physically put through that bypass structure, through our turbines. And we operate that as much as possible when we're in the high condition in order to bring that level down into our target range. But there are some physical limitations as well. Let's talk about the lake level. There is a target. This is called the Hanson rule curve. And so the target elevation is different in the summer than in the winter. It is a 1 foot difference. So in the summer, it's 446. In the winter, it's 445. And then there is a specified period of time for the transition. So in the fall, there's you can see it's a little bit shallower of a curve here than what we have in the spring. So there's 45 days to do that 1 foot change in the fall. In the spring, it's only 20 days to change the elevation. And so sometimes that kind of adds to the challenge. So if you have a lot of precipitation in the fall, and you have you have more coming in than you can put out, but you also need to drop you need to drop, I think the surface area of Seneca Lake is something like 70 square miles. You also need to drop 70 square miles of lake level a foot in the specified period. It can become a little bit challenging. And of course, we see the opposite condition in the springtime too. There's a band a target band. So the ideal is elevation 446 in the summer, but it's plus or minus 0.3 of a foot. And so that's the high and low band that we're seeing there. Anytime, so we measure, we have our own instrumentation that we measure the water levels at a few different locations. There is also on the main lake, Seneca Lake, there's a transducer that also measures elevation there. Our regulations are very tight, so we measure everything in 15-minute increments. And as soon as we have 3 data points, we call our regulator that are outside of this level. We call our regulators and have a conversation about what we're going to do, or email, right? We communicate with our regulators. There's also, if you can imagine that there's another band here, when we're starting to get on the low side of things, we have a level at which we turn the turbines off. So we stop generating, and that starts to give some kind of buffer, if you will, to dole that out and keep the level of the lake from going too low. So it kind of buys some period of time. I think one thing that's important to consider in all of this is that with that 750 square miles of drainage area, sometimes we have to anticipate days or even a week or more what might happen to these levels, and because there's a delay, right, from when we get some of our precipitation to what we actually see the effect on the lake being. So we often have to anticipate where these conditions might be going, and at the same time looking at the forecasts, understanding whether is there more rain coming, and we need to try to do more adjustment now to get ahead of what's coming next week, that type of thing, or is there nothing else in the forecast, in which case perhaps we change how we're addressing some of these releases. I think. So let's take a look at the real data here. So this is the last 2 years. By the way, I checked before this call. We are currently at 446 plus or minus. If you take a look at the gauge that's on Seneca Lake, I'm sure most of you have been out there, especially with the boaters. There can be some wave action. So our instrumentation, as well as that gauge, measures to the 100th of a foot. It is, fairly fairly precise instrumentation, and so when you start to get those, those waves moving around, it does shake up the instrumentation a little bit. So if you take a look at, I looked at the data through mid yesterday, and you can start to see that there is a band of scatter going on. When the wind hits the lake, it happens as well. But as of now, we're plus or minus 446, which is actually right on target. So let's look at the last 2 years of data that we have. I grabbed these earlier today, and you can see when we have these spikes here, this is precipitation. And I'm not sure why the months are gone from the bottom of this, but it's the same as the one to the right here. So it's January through December, and each one of these is another month. You can see that, these spikes, this is precipitation. Remember last year, it was a very wet year, a lot of precipitation, and you can see that in last year's plot here as well. Well before this, so this is 2020, and that was pretty dry by the end of the year. I would have to go back and look at exactly our data, but somewhere right around here, we turned off the turbines. So we didn't run the turbines from around, and this looks like maybe August or July, somewhere in this area, until it came back up above that lake level. We're off, and the only releases that we make are to maintain those environmental flows. This is generally, I guess, the end of Seneca. There is another hydro project further downstream, which is Van Cleef Lake. And this is a little confusing. So the Waterloo Dam at Waterloo holds back Seneca Lake. The Seneca Falls Dam in Seneca holds back Van Cleef Lake. So the next project downstream is Van Cleef. And this is much shorter, much more simple. The water available here, we have a little bit more runoff coming from the land, but it's essentially the discharge from the Waterloo project at this location. And so it's further downstream here. There's the dam right there. This one, here's an overview. This one, we have an automated crest gate right here, and we target elevation 430.5, and we keep it within a band of 1/4 foot plus or minus. But because Waterloo is kind of regulating the outflow at this point, and we have a crest gate that automatically flips up and down to keep the level stable, this one is comparatively very straightforward. But I thought just overall in the system, I wanted to mention that Van Cleef is here as well. So that is the information that we wanted to share today. And I do see that there's lots of questions. So Julie, how would you like to handle those? I'll start flipping back because they're probably all questions on Seneca.
Well, we can kind of go back, and if we need to clarify, we can come off, but we thought it'd be easy in chat. So the first is, who operates the bypass gate?
Oh, we do. So the bypass gate is right here. This is a big Tainer gate. And so generally speaking, there's a small, like I mentioned, we let some flow out of there under normal conditions for maintaining the environment. And those flows and what we need to provide, that's all to a certain extent out of our hands. It's in our permits. And then when we have a high water condition, so when we're above the rule curve, we will open this to discharge extra water out of the system and try to bring that level down. So we control that.
Great. And the next question is, does the change in water elevation relate to the opening and closing of canal for vessel transportation? And the comment is that it seems like a very short time frame to adjust the lake levels and at a sensitive time of the year, i.e. the rainy season.
Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot of information on, for example, how many lockages are happening. I think that, you know, overall, if we look at the size of our hydraulic system, one lockage, 1 day's worth of lockage is probably not, it's probably a little bit of a drop in the lake, if you will. It's not huge, but at the same time, that not to say that when that lake level is starting to come down, we get to a point where we shut everything off in order to try to keep it from dropping even further and actually getting below target elevation. And it's not, it is a fairly large volume of water that's going through here and being released. So how much of an impact, I don't know, because look, volume only means so much unless you know how often they're happening, right? So how much of an impact, I'm not exactly sure, but definitely, when there's very little coming into the system and there's still lockages going out, I'm sure at some point it has, some impact.
Hey, Celeste, this is Caitlin, and that was my question, and I wasn't, I guess, very clear. I asked the question when you were on the rule curve chart. So I was actually wondering the change in the rule curve in the spring and then again in the fall, is that related to when the canal sort of shuts down for vessels to move through?
Oh, I see. I think my general understanding, but I'm not sure that this isn't a regulatory document or anything, but usually when we see a change in lake level, it's to try to drop the level down and protect things like docks from ice. So that was my general understanding. It is, you are correct though. I believe that this is, we're going up, I believe, before recreation season starts, and definitely it's done by December 15th when we're down in level. So it could be related to that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
This probably goes back to the rule curve too. Is there an algorithm or clear set of rules that you use to operate the Gates turbines to control lake level?
Algorithm, no. We have, so when we're in the higher band, we operate the turbines, flat out when we can. When we are, I think this is where it's a little bit of an art and a science. If we're just near the band, near the top of the level, but we don't see a whole lot more precipitation going, then we leave it alone. If we see a lot more coming, then we'll start to, notify our regulators that we're going to open, the bypass gate and try to start, relieving the project early on. As we're starting to come down, towards lower summer levels, we will start to shut those units off. But ultimately, our regulations say that we can run until we hit a certain elevation, which is I believe it's 1/10 of a foot below the target, and then we turn everything off and leave it be. So a little bit of an art and a science, plus looking at the forecast, seeing what might be coming, trying to anticipate what's going to happen for the rest of the season.
Okay. And I don't know, where does Cayuga Lake discharge to? So that's the one downstream of us after Seneca.
I believe, I'm not an expert on that one by any means, but I'm pretty sure that that goes into the Erie Canal. I think that's the last structure before the Erie Canal.
That's what I remember too.
I'm sorry if somebody knows better, throw a comment in.
Who gets the power that is generated?
Julie, do you have the information on that?
Yeah, so on that one, Waterloo, we have an arrangement with Tompkins County. But as you know, those tend to be financial arrangements. So the power really does go to NYSEG, and I think somebody asked that later. And then there are transactions with Tompkins County for Waterloo, and Seneca Lake or Seneca Falls, I believe, just goes into the market, New York ISO market.
So it goes literally into the lines. I mean,
Yeah.
physically,
Everything goes into the lines.
Yeah, no matter who the end user is, physically, it goes into the lines. And then as electrons flow, it goes to the first people on those lines. From a business point of view, I believe that there are some net metering arrangements like Julie.
Yeah, there's some net metering with and when I say Tompkins County, it's the municipal through MEGA, which is the Municipal Energy and Gas Association in New York. It's an arrangement through them. What's the max power output of the turbines with all spinning, and is all power sold to NYSEG? So we just talked about where the power goes, but what about the output of the turbines?
Oh, geez. I want to say,
I mean, I know that's output, but I know, I mean, capacity is about 10 megawatts total.
The total is about 10 megawatts. Yeah. Seneca Falls is about 8 and Waterloo is 2 or so.
Yeah. Yep.
And just like back of the envelope, you know, your average household uses, I think it's about 1 kilowatt, something like that. So we're talking about the equivalent of 15,000 houses, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's what I have. How long does it take to change the level of the lake?
Oh, geez. Well, here with it depends on the it depends on the conditions. So you can see here that at times it takes months. So let's see, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 in 2020 towards the end of the year there just was no precipitation, and so waiting for that rain to come was months. Overall our capacity, I want to say we have at most 1,000 or 2 CFS of discharge, and compared to the size of the lake, it's not, it's a very large lake, so it's very difficult to bring it down when it's high, for sure.
Great. Who controls the amount of water that's released from Cayuga Lake to Seneca Lake? So
oh, geez, I think that's the New York Canal Commission. It's not us. I'm pretty sure that's the New York.
I think isn't it Penn Yan? I don't know. I know.
Yeah, Jill might be able to jump in here.
I know she knows this.
It's the Cayuga Lake Municipal. It's CLOC. It's CLOC. I can't remember what the CLOC abbreviation stands for, but it is a municipal effort at the gates in Penn Yan.
Oh, thanks for that, Jill.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
So Celeste, just related to that, does Gravity Renewables, connect or communicate with these, upstream and downstream entities that are controlling the flows from other lakes?
Yeah, our operations staff is in touch with the Canal Commission on a daily basis, and they're kind of the they're kind of the common connection between all of the hydraulic facilities, quite frankly, throughout the whole state. So we talk with them daily.
Is that who you were referring to when you said the regulators that you're in communication with? Is that what do you mean by regulators?
No, our regulators are the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, U.S. Fish and Wildlife of the Department of the Interior, and New York DEC.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So what CFS, so that's cubic feet per second, goes through the turbines at full capacity?
I think it's 1,800 CFS. I think they're about 6 each.
Yeah, that's what you were just explaining, why it's so hard to change the lake level, because there's so, frankly, little that goes through.
There's 3 turbines.
That's correct. At Waterloo Station, there's 3, and at Seneca Falls, there are 4.
Great. So here's a historical question. We're going to know this. So when the dams were built in 1916-17, how much did it raise the level of Seneca Lake? There were farmers in the area that is now Queen Catherine Marsh who grow vegetables and other commodities who were displaced.
I'm not aware that the level was raised at all. So for hydropower purposes, I'm not so sure about the blockages though. Jill, or Julie, are you aware of that?
I don't know. I do have some historical articles that I will share with you, Caitlin, if there's anything in those.
There's been controversy ever since the power plants and the dams went in, like to begin with the different communities between Geneva and Watkins Glen. It did different things to different ends of the lake, and there's always been controversy.
Yeah.
I will, you know, I don't know if it matters or not, but whether there's hydropower generation here or not, it is still a state lock structure for navigation purposes first and foremost. And so in a sense, the power generation is extra because whether you're generating or not, the vertical structure will be there for the lockages.
Right.
I mean, the hydropower was really added on because there was moving water, right? But the transportation is really the primary.
I'm sure there are people on the call that know the history better than I do. I have seen some historic maps where it was a completely different configuration, and it's actually really neat because there are all these kind of spurs coming out and going down river in order to get the mill powers to all different industrial facilities that were located there. I'm not going to pretend to be the expert on the history.
Celeste, if those are easily available, I'd love to see those and maybe share with the people that are on the call.
Let me see if I can dig it up again.
Okay, thanks.
So bringing us back to operations and today, is there a person physically present at the turbine, or are changes made remotely?
We can make some changes remotely. We have what's called they're also made automatically. So we have what's called a programmable logic controller, a PLC, which is you can think of it as a computer brain, and it's taking all different inputs, whether it's the transducers that we're measuring water level, also other things like performance of the units, temperature, vibration, all sorts of stuff. And it will make some automatic changes to the turbines. We also separately though have anywhere between 1 to 3 people on site every day, and they're also on call. So hydropower goes 24/7, and sometimes they do as well, and they do a really great job. Our operators have been at the plant for a long time. When we acquired these projects in mid 2016. And the operators, you know, that had been at the project for a long time, we actually, generally as a rule, we at Gravity keep all the operators because they just, I mean, you can't, nobody has knowledge like they do, and it's really important to keeping the facilities running.
Good. We may have already touched upon this, but is there coordination between Keuka and Seneca Lake Discharge? I think we may have covered that.
Yeah, we do it through the Canal Commission. Sometimes, you know, I think it's important to consider that no one project is isolated here. They're all part of a bigger system. And so when it's flooding in one area and we all, you know, then there's, you know, we follow our rules and regulations. But ultimately there's, you know, people downstream who are, you know, also kind of like what happens to us at Seneca, where, you know, if we have a lot of water, Cayuga has a lot of water, they're discharging, now we're getting more water, then we're doing that to the people downstream of us, right? And so it goes all through the entire system. Nothing is isolated. And And so through the Canal Commission, there have been a couple times where they've, we've worked with them. We've held back in high water conditions. We've held back so that they can get some things done, and then resumed our releases so that we didn't, exasperate our own issue. But within reason, while making sure that we're doing the best to meet the goals at Seneca Lake. We definitely try to coordinate with other people and work together.
Great. Jill is a good question. Are the lock structures, not the hydro, ever used to discharge water when the lake is too high?
Oh geez, this is a sensitive one, and the short answer is no. They're not built for that hydraulically. So it is not. It's not something that we assume can happen.
Okay. And then she also asks, why aren't the turbines and bypass gates releasing as much water as possible at the same time? Or was this last October when the lake was close to 448?
Oh, we were.
Yeah, I thought we were too.
Of course, in reviewing the FERC reports, it was a couple days apart, like all the turbines were operating at high speeds. But it took a couple days after that before the bypass gate opened up and started releasing as much water as it could. And it never seemed like they were all happening at the same time.
I would have to get back to you on the specifics of that.
Okay.
There's
There's not a reason why that can't happen. Under normal operating conditions, if water is high, everything should be able to pass water at the same time, except for the lock structures.
Yeah, we have absolutely no control over the lock structures, and they're not used for releasing water in high flow conditions. That might have been one of the rare cases where we were actually asked to hold back, but don't quote me on that. I would have to look up the specific details of what was happening at that time. But no, there's no reason that we can't physically run flat out and open the bypass gate at the same time, and it happens.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. And so Jill, your third question is, how often is the weather forecast checked and who's responsible for checking it? I just chuckle because I feel like we look at it constantly.
Yeah, we more or less check it every day.
We being
who?
Okay, you Celeste. Okay.
I mean, I think our operations team, when you work for a hydropower company, all you do is talk about weather and rain.
Yeah, I mean, our operators are very good, so they're keeping an eye on things as well. I take the data that we get, so I pull it from the lake level. I pull our own data, the data that I get off of our computer system, and plot it, take a look at it nearly every day.
Great. And this is, I think we've already touched upon this, but Keuka pushes a lot of water at Seneca. We have no control. You have no control over that. And the water rises. Can you then push more water out? I think that's the system that you were just talking about. Celeste, anything to add?
Yeah, that's, I mean, look, there are times when the discharge out of Cayuga is almost as much as we can push out of the system. So forget the precipitation that's coming in too.
Right.
So, we do our best to open up when it's getting high for sure.
Okay. So here's, I think, more of a comment. So it's always been the quote unquote norm that the power dam folks are responsible for the level of the lake. Can you comment on that?
Yep. So like I said, we're regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The current license is from 1997. There have been some amendments and little modifications to a few things, but ultimately the water levels are part of the FERC license from 97 on. I believe that there was a license for the 40 years before that. I can't actually say that I've read that license, but I suspect water levels were involved in that as well.
Right. Gosh, sorry, things are bouncing around here. So you said the canal east, okay, this is interesting. You said the canal east to Waterloo is really part of Seneca Lake. Was the area once a marsh and then a canal dug to corral the water into a waterway? That was kind of, yeah, right there.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, but when you say that it's part of the lake, you're saying that it really is fed by, I mean, its
I'm
behavior is more in line with the lake, right? Not that it is.
Maybe I should be a little more, let me try to put it a different way. Usually when we look at something that is kind of this shape, we would maybe think, oh, that's the river, right? and this is the lake up here. And usually when you look at our big lakes, or really any lake, the dam would be kind of in this location over here, closer to the main body. I guess all I'm trying to say is that actually this water level here continues all the way down. And so from a hydraulics point of view, the main lake is very similar to this stretch coming down here, and everything changes. So we drop the first 13 feet, 15 feet, something like that. The first dam is all the way down here. As far as the history of this, I mean, honestly, it looks pretty consistent width here. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was all excavated and isn't, you know, if you went back a couple hundred years, it wasn't quite like this. But I'm sure someone knows the history of that better than I do.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification, because it's just really where the dam is located is the differential, is the difference. Okay, the next comment is really much, it's a comment. I don't think there's anything to say on it, but I think sharing history with us. When the Seneca Canal was completed in 1915 to 1918, a large area of the Seneca Falls Industrial District was flooded to create Van Cleef Lake, and the move was very controversial at the time, which is, I think, what Jill or Caitlin was saying. We've seen that in the history as well. So going back to the question on algorithm, you said there's no algorithm, but you also said there's an automatic controls. How does that work? Please explain.
So a good portion of the controls are reading instrumentation on the turbines. So if you hit a certain temperature on the generator, a certain vibration limit, things like that, then it'll go into an automatic shutdown sequence. It also, if something were to happen where you hit, here's a good example. When the lake level is on its way up, we have transducers that are reading the level, and so the units will turn themselves on. Technically, I believe they can turn themselves off, but usually we actually try to err on the side of getting them off a little bit earlier to have that breathing room on the lake level. So I wouldn't call it an algorithm. It's more like, hit this number and it turns on or off, or adjust itself a little bit, depending on the circumstance.
Great. This just goes back to the coordination between Keuka and Seneca. I'm not sure whether there's anything more to say about it. Can you confirm whether there is in fact coordination between Keuka and Seneca?
We talk.
Yeah, so there's definitely talking going on.
Our communications are through the New York Canal system, New York State Canal system, which is, it gets a little confusing. They're owned by the New York Power Authority now. We all coordinate.
Great.
So you would talk to Canal Corp and Canal Corp talks to Cayuga Lake. Is that what you're saying, Celeste?
I believe they talk to Cayuga Lake, but all I can confirm is we talk to canals.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. And then we have a Go Red Sox. Thank you. Very nice for us Boston people. Okay, Caitlin, Pure Water volunteers are beginning to install rain gauges and input data to the local, I don't know, what's that, COCO RAHs? I'm not sure I'm saying that right, platform that reports data to the Binghamton Weather Service. Do you think additional data points would serve your prediction of when you release greater volumes of water to control lake levels? Could we look at data points like that, Celeste?
I would be interested to know more about the instrumentation that is being put out. Right now we use the National Weather Service. They collect data at it's a station called Geneva Farm Station. So they have instrumentation, they publish it. That's what we use right now. But we're sure we love data. It can't hurt.
Good. And Ted has a question. What happens if we are not available when any of these conditions are happening? I assume that's what it means.
Who's we?
I think that's us, like our hydropower coordinators or our operators to open gates, adjust any operations. I think we're always available is the answer. We always we have eyes on this thing, remotely and locally, and particularly, Celeste, I don't want to, when there's any events going on, we are on high alert all the time.
I mean, we have, I would say we have a lot of redundancy, and we also, there is an expectation that, when our chief dam safety engineer goes on vacation, that we're going to call him, if we need to have a conversation, and, he answers. So, I think that, in addition to the redundancy, it's rare that anyone is truly unavailable. And in that event, it is planned out well ahead of time. We also, as Julie said in the beginning, we have 15 projects, mostly throughout the Northeast. There's one in the South. So we have 14 projects in the Northeast. We have somewhere around 50 operations staff at those various projects. So I suppose if we really had to, we have, other people around that are very familiar with hydro. We also have a few companies in New York that are millwrights who help us out a lot when we're doing bigger jobs, and they're also very qualified as well. So lots of redundancy.
Yeah, and we of those 15 projects, 5 are in New York. So we have a lot of, particularly in New York, a lot of coverage. And Jill, I think, is following up on Caitlin's point. So would additional data, lake level measurements from around the lake be helpful, not just at Geneva, I assume?
Sorry, I'm thinking.
Caitlin was talking about precipitation data points for rain measurements. I'm talking about just lake level readings. We're thinking about putting in some site gauges at various locations, like middle of the lake, maybe south end of the lake, and the north end of the lake. We're going to be participating in a program that works with UNC Chapel Hill, and it's actually sponsored by NASA. This is new information, everybody. Nobody else knows about it yet but me. So we're going to be reporting that data probably on a daily basis to a website, and they're going to be publishing that. Would that those additional data points from various points on the lake be helpful to you?
Well, I have a couple questions to answer your question. What is the data frequency that you're anticipating?
I'm hoping for daily readings. But once again, we're relying on volunteers to obtain the readings, and occasionally they take vacation. So it's gonna vary a little bit, but I'm kind of excited about this program.
Okay. I guess I would be pretty interesting to just see what the difference around the lake is. But ultimately, I think it would be interesting to see. But right now we're using the 15-minute data, which is the resolution we need. So I think, just talking out loud here, probably what we would do is continue to use the data off of the Geneva gauge in the 15-minute increment. But occasionally take a look and see how it's comparing to what you're collecting as well.
Great. I know we're kind of coming up to the end. We got 2 quick questions here. So what are the other projects that we own in New York? Chittenden Falls, near Saratoga Springs on the Kinderhook Creek, Stillwater, small project on the Hudson, and Dahoa, which is Battenkill, right, Battenkill. So those are the others in New York. And then finally, do we have data? I mean, going back to that last October, which I think you have a graph for, right? What were the sources, for example? How much was kind of coming from the Keuka outlet and other streams? Do we have a sense of that?
There was a lot coming from the Cayuga outlet. They have a USGS gauge actually. So if you just Google USGS real time and then Cayuga, the gauge will come up and you can change the time scale, and you can see what they're discharging. So it went up quite a bit.
Yep.
For some 2000 CFS is ringing a bell, but don't quote me on that. And normal,
No, I think that's like, about right. I think
normal is like 100. So
yeah,
it was quite an event, as you all know.
And then there's other streams that aren't even monitored, like Big Stream that comes out of Dundee area. We have no idea what the flow going through there is, and I'm sure it was a lot.
What we can get is the precipitation from the National Weather Service Geneva station. And we can see, you see 0 or a small amount, and then all of a sudden you see this huge nut, you see like 8 inches or these really significant amounts of precipitation, and you can easily line it up with the discharges and see the correlation.
We will get you the information for the Keuka rainfall measurements, because that Geneva rain gauge that you're talking about actually shows up in their system. So we'll have other data points coming up around the lake as people get their rain gauges up and set up and start measuring those rain point data points.
Neat.
Great. I think that's about Caitlin. Hand it back over to you.
I just saw, maybe there's a delay, Julie, but I saw more coming in.
Oh, did you? Oh, wait a second.
Yep.
Well, there were some things Caitlin put up our website, which was nice. Some thank yous. And then how helpful would additional flow inputs measures be? Which may be similar to what Jill was saying.
I mean, flow is a very difficult thing to measure accurately. So I guess I'd have, I'm not quite sure how we would do that, I guess.
It's great to know there's all this other data out there though, too.
This is Dan. I asked about the flow input. So if we had additional USGS gauges on like a Big Stream or other inputs, would that be helpful?
Potentially. Ultimately though, I think that most of it is captured in the precipitation data. And because the lake is so big, we do see the rise with the precipitation. So, as soon as we see a lot of precipitation, we throw the turbines on and start immediately trying to bring it down. So, I guess I'd have to think about that a little bit more, but thank you for the clarification.
All right, well, obviously there's a ton of interest, and I think maybe this is actually, there's definitely more questions in this webinar than we've had in any other webinars, at least for the 2 years that I've been with Pure Water. So Celeste and Julie, thank you so much for, sticking around and, fielding all these questions and giving, the best answers that we could have hoped for. This is going to be an ongoing, conversation and partnership. And Julie, we really appreciate, being in touch with you over the last several years. I know that you and Jill have become acquainted, and you and I are getting to know each other a bit too. So I just really appreciate your time. And Celeste, thank you so much for all of your knowledge. And if there's any additional resources that Julie or Celeste you come across that you think would be of interest to the people who joined us tonight, I'm happy to share those. And
great.
Yeah, let's stay in touch.
No, we learn from you too. So we are in this together. So thank you. We definitely need to share information.
Yeah, we really appreciate you setting this up. It is a more complicated system than usual, and I think the more knowledge everybody has, I think it's great. So I'm really impressed with the number of people that came out today. So thank you for everyone's interest.
Yeah, and of course, if there's anything that Seneca Pure Waters could provide to you is in additional information about Seneca Lake, or there's a lot of talk about precipitation, rain gauges, discharge. into Seneca. If ever there's a question for us or some way that we can be a resource to, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jill. Thanks for putting this together for us, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Thanks. Take care.